So we're going to talk about the opportunities available in Kenya, right? So we're all here for different reasons. Some of us are here from the diaspora, some of us are here in Kenya, some like the lady at the back are planning to go to the diaspora at some point for school, after you finish your GCSEs. Good luck with that. And we're talking about what opportunities there lay in Kenya, right? Because we're here every day, and despite the difficult environment that we sometimes live in, there's a lot of opportunities available, correct? Yeah, I'm sure we can all see it, and sometimes if we can't, there's always a new thing we're able to see. And so we're going to introduce panelists who will help us to look at and give us a better view of the environment and the opportunities available. So I'd like to introduce Nashon Miwizi, and I'd like to introduce Michelle Watiki. So to lighten it up, I'd like you to both introduce yourselves. Tell us about yourselves and what you do.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. So my name is Nashon Miwizi. I'm a Kenyan, I have to say that. I've worked in the UK before. I was in the banking sector. I worked with BOFA, that is Bank of America, in IT security. Then later on, I moved back to Africa. Now I'm into telecom, as some people may call it mobile network operation. And I'm into increasing connectivity within the Sub-Saharan region in terms of reaching the last mile. And specific niche is in engineering quality assurance. So we have a variant of products from the space that I work with, which include, I forgot to say I work for Huawei. Some people say, who are we? So different people pronounce it differently. So we have the consumer market that is known for mobile networks, doing mobile devices. But we also have enterprise. You've heard of Konza project that here in Kenya that is also powered by Safaricom. We are into software. Recently, we've, in partnership with Safaricom, I think most of you have heard of ZD, which is mobile MMF. I think MMF now is the conversation going on in Kenya. And also Fuliza. Those are some of the products that we work together with our partners to bring to life. We are also into digital economy in terms of renewable energy. Our language, we say digital power, which is leveraging on the opportunities available in Africa. Kwetu kuna jua, so we try to work on that. And also data centers. Everyone is speaking of AI. And of course, to enhance the capability of AI, we all know that you require a lot of data. And this data has to be stored somewhere. So we are also working on the data space and that area. I've done a bit of research in 5G V2X for PwC and Huawei partnership. That is autonomous vehicles sometimes back. How we can use 5G capability, that is low latency, high speeds, to change the traditional direction range into the current 5G and 5.5G. So that is the space that I've been working on, and I'm happy to be part of Jasiri Network, and thank you, Nancy, for inviting me.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Watiki, and I am a founder and also COO of a company called Duck. Yes, the animal. So I have quite an interesting background. So I'm actually a chemical engineer on paper by degree. So I used to work corporate in a company called Rolls-Royce. And my speciality at the time was nuclear engineering. So I was #corporate babe. And then I decided to make a really massive, scary pivot into the world of entrepreneurship. Not just entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship back home in Kenya. So about 6 months ago, I made the move back to Nairobi to officially launch my company. So what do we actually do at Duck? So we're an AI and data analytics company. We actually do AI, it's not just for fundraising. And what we do is we essentially provide insights to some of the largest consumer brands across East Africa. So think of Unilever and P&G. And how we do this is we plug into some of the biggest supermarkets across Kenya and receive these insights in real time, and we feed them back up the supply chain. And the reason why we do this is so that when you go out into supermarkets, you are getting the fairest prices. And also manufacturers are able to actually distribute their products evenly, reduce their waste, and increase their bottom line. So this is an area, as you can imagine, which is completely different to my background. And I guess for me, I saw a growth opportunity in Kenya, and I just ran in that direction without looking back. It's going well so far, and I've partnered up with quite a lot of different VCs in the ecosystem, attended a lot of events, and worked with, again, really, really large enterprise customers across the continent. So thank you for having me.
Ooh, we have really impressive panelists. So I'm going to jump into a bit of a tough question, and I'll move on to the softer ones. In fact, I love your introductions, right? So both of you are working essentially within the Kenyan space in one way or the other, right? So the question is, how does the current economic landscape in Kenya influence investment opportunities, considering that you're both working in different spaces, right? Because you're using AI and you're able to see, particularly retail space, you're able to see how the business environment is going, how it's going in that sense. And then you're working in IT, but in a completely different space, but then Huawei's products essentially cover a lot wider than just, like you're saying, outside of telcos, you cover a lot of organizations. So how's the business environment looking, and how is it affecting everything?
Okay. First of all, I will look at it from a telco perspective. Right now, there's a lot of opportunities that we need to first unlock. Look at what Kenya provides in terms of current situations within the country. I will speak looking at two main aspects. The digital economy, especially when it comes to the digital power, which some people call it renewable energy. And I'm happy that one of us will speak on a bit on that. And also, there's a lot of data that is being collected currently, and how we can use that data, how we can store that data and actually make business out of it. So 75% of Kenya population is made of youth. This is a very good opportunity. Why? Because the receptive to technology is very high. So in the aspect of building the economy, looking at the opportunity of the youth population that we have, and the opportunity that Kenya is in the eastern part of Africa, we are, how to say, we are in a good opportunity, or in terms of the weather, the kind of sunlight exposure that we have here in the region give us an opportunity to look at how we can enhance the solar and how we can generate energy, especially when it comes to renewable aspect. Everyone is talking about green economy. When I look at Huawei, what are we doing currently? We are trying to look at all the telcos and also the enterprise, the government, to enhance the kind of operation, especially in the mobile operation. There's high request for data and for power. For manufacturing and transmission of networks require a lot of power, especially within the data center environment. So trying as much as possible to develop a lot of solar systems, and also how to make, how to make the current businesses take this opportunity and solutions in terms of the product that we provide, like in digital power, to be able to sustainably enhance our operations, reduce the cost of running businesses. One of the key challenges that we are facing as a startup is how to get these opportunities, okay? And that's one areas where we are coming in to to be able to push forward the agenda so that people can understand you can actually run business in a more sustainable way, trying to enhance the technology that has been provided by the current situation in Africa.
Yeah. Okay, Michelle?
So I'll speak on this from just a tech perspective. I mean, I've been in the tech space now for just under a year. But first things first, I think Kenya is it's one of the 4 biggest ecosystems in tech across Africa. So you have Nigeria, you have Kenya, you have South Africa, and you also have Egypt. And what this means is that when you get into Kenya, the ecosystem is there ready, waiting for you. Investors are there ready, looking for you. Why? It's because there's so many enablers, right? So if you are someone who is familiar with a couple of companies, tech companies, for example, whom have been tech giants, but let's say have not gone far, it means that right now, if you were to start something, you are actually learning from the mistakes of others that have come before you, as opposed to starting from scratch. So people always ask me, Michelle, why did you just decide to leave engineering and start a tech startup, especially in Kenya? And for me, it was, I found an African problem and I was looking for an African solution, as opposed to copying and pasting something that I saw in the UK or in the US, which I see people do. However, most times that fails because that ecosystem is not there to facilitate those solutions, right? So it will only take a number of years for them to not go that far. So I always tell people when it comes to just being able to navigate that ecosystem, being able to put yourself out there and find a problem to solve. I always get people always telling me, tech is everywhere, why do I have to incorporate tech? Why am I forcing issues? And I always tell people, well, tech isn't an enabler, right? You're not supposed to start off with a product. You're supposed to start off with a problem, find a manual way of solving it, and if somebody can pay you for it, then tech is then used to accelerate that growth. Right? A startup is very different to a business. In a startup, you are trying different solutions, iterating it again and again until you find product market fit, right? And at that point, your tech is not perfect. It's not Huawei perfect, right? You're still very scrappy, but then that's when you go out to investors. And if you're in somewhere like Kenya, they are very accessible. They are so many organizations that, especially some that are actually here today, that are here to support you, to help you. Also large corporates like KPMG. I was at one of their Women in Investing breakfast events the other day, and the whole purpose of that event was, how do we put money in the hands of female founders? Because they only access 2% of capital worldwide. So just by being a female, I'm disadvantaged, right? However, being in Kenya, those resources are there, that collaboration is there. And for me, I found that a lot easier to navigate than the European tech ecosystem, surprise, surprise, which is actually a lot trickier. There's a lot more red tape. So if you're someone who is looking to cross borders, be international, I'd say Kenya is a fantastic starting place, purely because it's still very immature in a sense of there's not much red tape, so you can play around with what you're building, and there's so many problems here for you to solve, which means you can be as creative as possible with your solution.
Okay, that's amazing. Now, jumping off that, there are many people here who are thinking about moving back. Some people have gone, and like the previous panelist said, abroad is not for everybody, right? Most people go, and then a couple of years later, like, what's going on? You just want to move back. Because it is challenging settling abroad. I think everyone who's gone can tell you that. It can take you a couple of years to feel like you belong. And then at some point, it's always a weird point, just telling someone, if you move abroad, there's like a crossover point where you come back home and then you feel like you don't belong as much anymore. And then life has moved on, right? And suddenly you go back to London or wherever and you feel like that's a bit more home. You come back to Nairobi and suddenly you're disconnected from a lot of these things, right? So this is a very, very tricky situation. So that's why many people always struggle with trying to figure out whether to stay abroad or whether to come back, sometimes even when abroad isn't working out for them. I'm very curious about like how you've leveraged your global experience and how other people would leverage their global experience coming back home. Because sometimes you always feel like you've been far removed from the Kenyan market for so long. Sometimes if you're an employee, you feel that you'll come back here and people see your work experience in the UK and think you're too expensive. Some people, sometimes, these are the challenges people face, right? Sometimes people look at it and they're like, they might think I'm too expensive or think my work experience is too far removed from the local market. So exactly how have you leveraged your international experience back in Kenya, and how do you feel that other people can leverage their international experience from where they are back home, their experience and their networks?
I think I will start with the experience I had when moving to Africa from studying abroad or working abroad. I was in a different market. I was in more of banking market. Now, moving back to Kenya, I'm coming back into telco. And I got an opportunity to go, not directly here in Kenya, but to go and work in Ethiopia. And there's always this expectation that, you know, you're coming from the UK, you've studied, you have a very nice degree, you have very nice exposure. So you have an expectation when you come here, everything should run smoothly. But the biggest challenge is when you come here, you find a bit of, things are not as per your expectations. It's not like you send your CV and you get 5 jobs offer. It's not like that. So what I learned is, as much as you're working in the global areas, whether you're in the US and the UK, it's good to keep on maintaining your network currently here in Kenya or wherever part you are from Africa. Those are the networks that will enable you to settle in and be able to survive, quote unquote. The second bit is trying to provide solutions that are custom-made for the local market. Sometimes you study a whole telecommunication degree, which is a very broad, or you study a whole, let's say genetics, which is very broad, but when you come to Africa, the need that is required in this space is specific, and if you don't get to understand what is the need, then you find like you are a bit displaced. So first thing, what I did, I came and to try understand how are things currently running here. Trying to localize myself again, given that I had an opportunity to work here before, then went out, now I'm coming back. So localize myself, look at, update myself with my local networks and see where is the gap. How can I come in? Then you find, okay, here in Africa, we have opportunity in connecting last mile connection, lighting up the dark parts, because when you look in Kenya, we have a challenge in certain areas. We still have places that there's less connectivity. And I'm just speaking from the telco perspective. So where is the niche in your area of specialty? So you try to provide solution in that part. Second bit is what unique thing that you are able to provide that currently is maybe limited or is not even available. So based on the knowledge that you've acquired and the experience and the interaction that you've acquired abroad, you try as much as possible to leverage on that, bring it here, and people will see value that you are trying to bring. Because at the end of the day, people will not see value by the name you studied in certain university or you studied a certain course. Is what solutions are you providing to our own current problems? I think once you understand that, then it becomes easy for you to transit, come back, and actually have a win.
I definitely agree with that. So I remember before choosing to found my startup. So my CEO is actually at the back over there, so we're going to keep this between us. So before I decided to work with him, I was actually looking for job opportunities in Kenya. And I had grown up in the UK, gone to school in the UK, but my parents are from Kenya, so I've always wanted to go back home. So I was actually like on LinkedIn looking for jobs, sending off my CV, and then I think there's like a button you can click and it sends like your CV in like a wave of companies, right? And then it was just like decline. And I was like, what? Like I have a good degree, I have a good background, like why does no one want me? I want to go back home, I have to go back home. And then, interestingly enough, how I found my co-founder was through LinkedIn, right? And he was he actually had a previous startup that he was working on, which I was quite interested in. And I managed to get 10 minutes of his time because he was so busy. And we had a chat and we literally kicked it off. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to go home. Now, this transition was interesting because you hear a lot about returners or people moving from Kenya to the UK, but you don't really hear about people moving from the UK to Kenya, especially for the first time. So I got to Kenya and I was like, right, okay, I'm not on holiday, so I can't go to the bar every day. I have to work and pay some bills and the rest of it. And I'm still going through it now, but I call it an identity crisis. And the reason is because a lot of us try to hold on to a previous version of ourselves, not realizing that by being aware, you have evolved as a person, right? Your tastes, your interests, your hobbies, what you like doing, what you want to do with your career. And it's only until you embrace that new version of yourself, you find yourself attracting people around you and opportunities around you. And you won't get that by being at home saying, well, yeah, I'm struggling, so on. You have to throw yourself out there. So when I first launched the company, we were applying to different acceleration programs, such as Antler, for example, or Founders Factory Africa 54 Collective, right? And these are large organizations. And I spent some time with them, and in the end, I decided, maybe they're not for me. But just by being in that space around people, there were just 1 or 2 connections I got from these large organizations that I carry to date through my journey, and they have helped me through fundraising, through customer acquisition, even through finding other founders who we can just cry together on a Saturday because we're still working. It's just the little things, right? But I only did this when I let go of Michelle, corporate, always looking good, always, in heels and going to events and off someone's budget. But now it's my budget and it's my company and, I don't get holidays and the rest of it. And when I embraced this, I just attracted a whole new kind of chapter of me. And that just made life a lot more, I wouldn't say easier, but enjoyable. Like the struggle became a lot more fun for me.
That's interesting. Moving back can always be a challenge. So, throwing back the both of you for something you may have answered indirectly, but would need a bit more outright, is that what are some of the gaps and opportunities you've seen which are unexplored so far, which you feel people could meet back in Kenya?
I will touch on 3 things. When you look at the opportunities, you don't look for things that don't exist. You look at the things that exist and see, this is what we have. How can we make it better? That's your opportunity. And one area that I feel here in Kenya is a very good opportunity for us to start looking at is what we do well as Kenyans, agriculture. Agriculture is one of the main earners of Kenyan economy. But how we are doing agriculture is the big opportunity. I've seen some of companies or some of the startups here in Kenya doing things like precision farming. One in Eldoret, I think it's called Kumul Farms. They are doing very well in terms of trying to automate how you're doing agriculture. And one way of it is what I've just mentioned. Another aspect is automation. All the processes that we have currently, you look at the manual kind of operation that is existing. How can you automate and make it better? Okay? Everyone speaks of AI, blockchain, and all this kind of technology. But how do you make earnings? How do you make business out of it? So when I look at the opportunities, I look at the current business and the current operations, whether it's enterprise or it's carrier or it's normal SMEs, trying to look at the loopholes of their operations and use technology to try and automate. Second bit is, currently as we speak, the outreach in terms of lightening up the economy or lighting up the country for digital economy space, connectivity and all this. We've not attained the standard that we ought to have. You go to areas, for example, recently I've been to Tanzania. You go deep in Linga or Morogoro areas, zero connectivity. People are not connected. They are not able to utilize the M-Pesa or the Tigo Pesa and this kind of solutions that we have. So how can you be able to extend that kind of connectivity so that there's inclusion in terms of everyone is connected, at least someone can be able to make a call, even if it's not, run a very big business, but at least common communication is able to establish. So some of the startups have tried to see how we can extend to these remote areas. And also looking at as I say, the population, we have more young people. What are some of the products that we can actually bring that will be more enticing to young people, especially in the digital space? As, our president has been capturing quite a number of issues regarding enabling the young people to do business or enabling the young people to do innovations deep within their space or within their location without having to move to the towns. So these are opportunity that when you move back in Kenya, you look at how can I make it as a business. Second bit is when we are talking about new technology, like 5G, V2X, and all these kind of things. You're talking of carpooling or you're talking of autonomous vehicles, but how do you make that as a business currently? So it's all a matter of trying to bring local solutions for the local problems, not copy-pasting something that works in the US and bring it directly to Kenya. Try to look at what are the problems that are here and what are the solutions that I come to be able to solve those problems. Then once you solve the need, that by itself becomes a business.
I definitely agree with that. I think he actually captured quite a lot of the industries I was going to mention. But just to take it one step further, so when you identify an opportunity, I guess the next question is going to be, is this an opportunity that I should make a business out of, or is it going to be an hobby, right? Like how can I differentiate between the two before investing my time and my effort? And this is something that a lot of people tend to skip or tend to kind of jump over, but customer discovery is so important. Taking time to actually sit down and speak to the people that are experiencing this problem, right? So think of someone who works in a small, let's say, retail shop, and they've been manually inputting their invoicing, let's say, using pen and paper. And then you spend time with maybe one of them, and then you decide, I'm going to give them an iPad and make them do it manually, right? Have you considered that the cost of the iPad itself just to charge it? They can't afford the electricity. They can't afford the actual wire or the cable. So you can give it to them. It's going to cost you something, right? It's going to be an overhead. Whilst you have investment, it's all well and good. But in terms of a sustainable business, is it going to work? Is it going to last? It isn't, right? And that's because you haven't done your customer discovery well. And you've touched upon something really important, which is in business, most times you are just pushing a needle slightly forward, right? Unless you are the Microsoft or the Jeff Bezos of this world, you're not going to wake up and suddenly discover something that no one else has ever thought of. At the end of the day, it's how well you execute it, right? So I always start from where have people failed and how far did they get and how can I push the needle and make it 1% better. And that 1% better accumulates over time, right? And that's what I call leveraging the ecosystem. Don't just think, this is a brand new idea, it's amazing, it's fantastic, I thought of it. Chances are someone's tried somewhere and someone's failed, right? So learn from other people's failures in those different ecosystems, whether it's in agri-tech, so there's a lot of data capturing in agri-tech, there's a lot of companies working in health tech as well. Some of the challenges in health tech is actually monetizing the technology. How do you get hospitals to pay for this if they're government hospitals, right? Hospitals are not known to have a lot of money to begin with. So even if you give them something groundbreaking or you patent it, as a founder, are you going to make money off it, or are you just going to be another starving founder, right? So I think it's really important to differentiate the two and focus on just making that incremental improvement once you find an opportunity, and also validating that it is needed and it's easy for the ecosystem to adopt.
As we wrap up, I have a question which a couple of people have, right? So, because both of you working in a both global and local space at the same time, what are 2 challenges you faced in entrepreneurship, and what do you think the solutions are towards them?
Yep. So I think for me, when I was in corporate, I was lucky enough to work for a really large engineering company, right? And I had a team underneath me. I had a really comfortable budget. I had a HR team to hire for me, and I just wake up, get there for like 9, 10, leave at 5. It was great. 9 to 5 is amazing, right? And then when I jumped into entrepreneurship, it was, oh crap, I have to do everything by myself, right? And there are a lot of things that are broken that I took for granted back in the UK, that when I got to Kenya, I was like, oh my God, okay, first of all, traffic, let's start from there. Just getting to meetings, right? So I don't have a physical office, I work virtually, I empower everyone in my team to work virtually. And the reason is because we want to sit in with our customers as much as possible, as opposed to being in different spaces. And because we work with enterprise clients, so we decided not to work with SMEs. We said, hey, let's work with people who have a large budget and can pay us a lot of money, which makes a lot of sense, right? However, the downside to working with enterprise clients is you will be with them for 6 months before you sign a contract with them. It will take a while. But the beauty of it is that you will spend so much time learning about them, learning about their pain point, going through different members of the organization, different people who will potentially interact with your product as well. And I find that it's a lot easier here in Kenya to rock up to someone's office and they are more willing to have a conversation with you than it is in the UK, because I know my diary management was tricky. Like, I would block off all my time. No one could get hold of me. But here in Kenya, I find people are a lot more kind of welcoming, and everyone is boots on the ground. So that kind of hierarchy is not there as much, especially in the space that I'm in. So I'm working with manufacturers, so I would tend to go to their manufacturing plants and spend a lot of time with them. And that is something that would have been not as accessible to me because of HSE, right? Because of, I need a hard hat, I need hard boots, I need to sign like 50 documents, I need to go through clearance, etc. So again, that was the beauty of us working with retailers in Kenya. And then also secondly, it's, I was taught the value of being patient, waiting for things, because things here, they move slowly, right? But I also believe that because they move slower, it gives me more time to be reflective. It gives me more time to actually plan out my strategy. So instead of seeing it as a downside, like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in traffic for XYZ long, or this process isn't working, or I'm trying to hire and it's taking me months and months, it allows me to kind of hone in on what it is that I want to do, which makes me less susceptible to making the wrong decision. So again, there's kind of pros and cons, I'd say, but I'd say if you are someone who is, well, similar to me, where you just want to keep moving forward, it's definitely good to just be optimistic about things when you can.
I'll touch on 2 things. Someone mentioned that sometimes it's easy to start a business in the UK than in Kenya. And I don't want to shout, but somehow that's true. Why? Because of the policy framework. Sometimes the policy that we have, the bureaucracy makes it hard for people to start business and even investors to come in and start businesses. So one thing that I feel, it might not be the audience here, but the people who sit in that kind of level, we need to try as much as possible, 1, automate, and number 2, to make sure that our policies are attractive for people to start business, especially for startups. Second biggest challenge I find is OPEX, okay? You've started the business, but maintaining that business becomes a challenge, especially if it's a cost-intensive kind of sector. It's important you understand the dynamics of the sector you're trying to get into in terms of what you require to fully run the business. That is resource-wise, machinery, and all these kind of things, because sometimes you start, then you realize, oh, maybe I did not do my research well. There's a lot of what is required for me to actually keep on running. So sometimes it's good to understand, for me to have this business running, what kind of costings do I need to be able maybe to get my first PO or my first payment, so that it's not about trial and error. It's actually you have a clear plan This is how I'm going to raise my funds. This is the kind of resources I require. This is kind of equipment. These are my clients. So you have a roadmap that is clear on your side how you're going to follow that roadmap. If you don't do this, then it becomes a challenge when you discover 3/4 into implementation, whoa, I'm not able to run because of the operation cost.
Thank you for the wonderful session and presentations. So I'm very curious because I moved back here and I've been trying to understand the startup ecosystem in Kenya, which is quite difficult to know if you do not know people already in this ecosystem, like incubation centers and even VCs around town. So how do I maneuver to get to know and meet these people? And then number 2 and final, in the West, there's this model where startups are kind of scouting for talent because your team is important and you need brilliant minds from like those top universities. Stanford is an entire place where just startups come around to just hunt for students. Now, since your startup is here in Kenya, are you thinking of doing this with the Kenyan universities? And how do you plan on scouting for this good talent in Kenyan universities?
I guess my question is more around funding. So staying in the UK, I just wonder whether it's easier to get funding locally, because like you said, I know KPMG sponsors people, gives funding, but on the other side, if I look at like big companies within the UK, they give a lot of funding. So I'd want to hear how your funding experience has been and whether it's easier to actually get funding if you're registered locally or internationally.
Yes, my question is to Michelle. You say that you work with enterprise clients and not necessarily SMEs. I'm curious, do you have like a threshold that you set and say our minimum ticket size for any job that we do is X? Or do you ever encounter scenarios where somebody's budget is way below what you always expect as a business, and how do you handle such?
Awesome. So the first question was around, is it accessing the Kenyan tech startup ecosystem? I would probably say a lot of the tech ecosystem is online, right? So if you literally go on Google and type in Kenyan accelerators or African accelerators, and because Kenya is a tech hub, you will find a lot of them are based here, and they host amazing events with lots of free food and drinks. Highly recommend you attend them and you network. If you want to get into tech, if you want to start a startup, the key skill that you need to have is sales. You need to sell yourself, you need to sell your vision, you need to sell your business. Even if your business is just you and an idea you had yesterday and hasn't come to fruition, go to these events and pitch it and see how people respond to it. So, for example, this just being here at this network summit, there are a couple of people who are tech enablers already in the room. Get their business card, send them an email. People always say, don't cold email, it's spam. Most of them don't actually get cold emails. I was in Silicon Valley the other day. So I was in San Francisco, and one of the VCs there said to me, I'm a partner at this large VC and I get about 2 cold emails a month, right? The rest of them are people that I know. What does that mean? Most people don't reach out to them because they're too scared to, right? But it's if you can't sell yourself to your local ecosystem, you're going to struggle to sell yourself to customers. You're going to struggle to get to scale, right? So yeah, just start with selling yourself and putting yourself out there and just networking. You have to be really, really good at networking or have someone in your team that's really, really good at networking. Second question was fundraising, if that's correct. So we are registered in Delaware, so a US company. So that means it's easier for international investors to invest in us as opposed to if you were just registered in Kenya. But you can be registered in your kind of local home and then also have another entity that sits on top of you. I have not actually checked Europe. So I know in Europe it's a bit different. London, it's a bit different. So the reason why we haven't looked at UK VCs is because you need to be registered in the UK, and if you have gone through that process, Jesus Christ. So I'd probably say pick an area that makes you more accessible to a large root of investors, and then also focus on your primary market. So even though we are registered in Delaware, even African VCs want us to be registered there because it makes it easier for them as well, because their holding companies are most times international offices. right? It's not just Delaware, there's also Mauritius as well, which is a bit more local. But you can get quite a lot of this information kind of online and pick the one that suits you, suits your value prop, and suits where you want to be based as well. And the third question was about enterprise customers, was it ticket sizes you mentioned? So for us, when we were doing our customer discovery, we said to ourselves, how painful is this problem, and how willing are people to pay for it, right? And then we stretched it and we said, what is the most that they can pay for it? So I just kept kind of moving the needle until we got to like a threshold of actually, of the largest companies in Kenya, this is what they'd pay for it. And then we based our value proposition off that. So we don't actually charge a flat rate, we charge a percentage, right? But however, at the same time, it's because we deal with enterprise customers and because a lot of the data that we get are from large supermarkets, Carrefour, Naivas, Chandarana, and a lot of the suppliers that stock in the supermarkets are larger manufacturers. So even if you were to come to me as a smaller retailer, if you don't necessarily stock in these large supermarkets, I may not be able to help you at this moment in time. But we do have a strategy where if we are able to capture all of this data, we can actually start bringing it down the supply chain to small SMEs. So if I wanted to start, let's say, a hair care product, and I wanted to know how can I compete against Nice and Lovely, I can speak to Duck, and I can get that information to help my SME, right? Or if I wanted to start a drinks beverage, and I wanted to see how KO are doing, or how Pernod Ricard are doing, I can know how they're doing across the large supermarkets. So in terms of the data, we started with who pays the most, and then now we have this information, we do want to kind of cascade it down the supply chain.
Thanks so much for being part of this. It's been an exciting discussion. And part of it is every one of us here is going to create something in the space that they're in, right? This is where you say, yes, we are, right? You're going to create it as an entrepreneur or as an employee. For the longest time, I've done it under employment. I have a startup-ish idea, and I'll be joining Michelle in about 6 months on that path. But we all have the chance to see opportunities in our spaces, right? Irrespective of how the country is going, irrespective of a lot of things that are going on, we all have the chance to create whatever we want. And it's never too late. This is my chance to tell you to quit that job. Okay, don't in this economy, but take the risk that you want to take, build it, because every successful person you see around you is just someone who made a decision to follow their dreams, and they made it happen. So I want to thank the panelists for sharing their amazing experiences across entrepreneurship and employment and how they've made it. And I want to thank all of you for listening and for contributing and for talking about the opportunities we have in our beautiful country, Kenya. So thank you so, so much, and have a great, great day ahead.